Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Behind the Business. And we are here recording episode 18 of the episodes that we've been doing so far, which has been delivering useful content, information, tips, tricks, and things that you can utilize right now to turn your business into the success you've always wanted it to be by improving your mindset, improving your internal structures, internal processes, and everything else, and everything on either side of that as well. So welcome if it's the first time you've come to see us. My name's Steve Swift and I run a company called Client Direction, and you can visit that at clientdirection.com. And I help people that are struggling in business to put things in place that's going to take the business forward. It's going to automate things, do lead generation, deal with the sales cycle in the marketing side of the business, and making it so it flows so you have a bit more free time. And I'm going to introduce to you my very good friend who does a lot of other really exciting stuff and will also help your business. And so I'll hand over to John. Over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, as Steve said, my name is John Child. I'm from a company called SkypeLifeCoach.uk. You can also find me at presentationskills101.com. I am a productivity coach, success coach, and all things in between, really. I don't know what happened there, but we got there in the end. How's things for you this week, Steve?
Very good, mate. Very good. It's been an interesting week with regards to where I've got with my marketing plan. And I say that because that is actually the topic for this week's episode. Because last week we talked about how you can prepare before you start to do your organic marketing. And the week before that, we discussed split testing your ads. A week before that, we've touched on over the last 3 or 4 episodes now of actually building out a marketing structure. But what we need to do and what we're going to cover today is the actual planning of it. So we've given you the elements and the bits and pieces, but we're now going to show you how we're going to be putting that together and the things you need to be considering and how you can actually plan that out, rather than what a lot of people do is, I know I'm going to do a lot of posts on LinkedIn. I'm going to see what business I can do. I'm going to build myself a Facebook private group, and then I'm going to see how much business I can make. And if you're thinking of doing that, I can tell you now, you're going to really struggle. And if you want to know why, get in touch with me, because there's a big problem. People think Facebook private groups are going to make them money. And I know someone that's heavily tested this recently, and I'm talking recently in the last few days, but they've done it over the last 2 months, and they have got that much of a result from it. And they've thrown thousands of pounds and 2 months worth of a lot of time and hours and resources, and it's not worked. And they know this space very well. They've been in it for 10 years or more, and there's lots happening there. But what I've done with regards to the marketing plan and why it's fits quite nicely in with this episode, John, and to answer your question about what I've been doing this week, is I'm at a negotiation stage of my marketing plan with some very key blue chip clients. We're talking big players in the construction industry, where they've got the best part of 85 projects active and live right across the UK. So England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And we're at that point now where we're looking to demonstrate and present to them solutions as opposed to an individual service. So that's where I'm at. And there's a reason why we do solution-based as opposed to service-based. And there's a little bit of a golden nugget for you to take away today already, is if you give somebody the price for a service, they can go and check it against the exact same service somewhere else, and then you're competing on price. As opposed to if you give a solution with lots of different elements packaged in a unique way, it's much harder for someone to price condition you. So, and that's why we're doing that. But how about yourself, John? What have you been busy doing this week?
Coaching, Steve. Pretty much. It's pretty busy at the moment, and that's always a good thing,
Absolutely, absolutely.
So yeah.
So this week we're talking about how you plan your marketing, and I'm going to hand it over to you, John, just to run with it, because I know you've made some notes, and as always, I like to just literally just give it as it comes into my head, sort of thing. So I'll probably jump in every now and again. But do you want to take the lead on this, mate, and we'll go from there, and
sure.
We'll see what value we can give everybody this week.
Okay, well, there's a challenge. So yeah, as Steve said, we're talking about marketing plans this week, and this is going to work very well with what we're going to talk about next week, which is a marketing calendar. Okay. And the reason we're talking about this is because, as Steve rightly said in previous episodes, and in fact, way back in the early episodes, we started talking about components that you would put into a marketing plan. So things like the client avatar, your company mission, your personal values, those kind of things. Now, why is it important that you have an actual plan, either written down or on the computer or wherever? Why is that important? Well, it's important simply because if you don't write it down, you run the risk of doing exactly what Steve just described, which is knee-jerk reaction. I'm going to run over here and do this. I'm going to run over here and do this. And it's not consistent. There's no cohesiveness. There's nothing linking it all together. And if there's nothing linking those efforts together, two things happen. The first thing is you probably overpay and you have no idea what your return on investment is. But more importantly, from the point of view of your client, is it's confusing. They don't know what's going on. They don't know why you're doing what you're doing because it doesn't fit together, as I say. And you run the risk of forgetting those important things like putting across your values, putting across what you want to say to the client, to educate the client, and it becomes very much a hodgepodge. So that's the reason we're talking about this today, and that's why it's important. And people like myself and Steve, we have marketing plans. Steve just told you he's in the middle of negotiating a marketing plan for a project at the moment. I have marketing plans as well. We have a marketing plan in progress for Behind the Business, the podcast, which is why we've got a new YouTube channel now, which if you haven't subscribed to, you should be subscribing to as we speak. But while you're doing that, I'm going to talk you through a few ideas of what you should put in your marketing plan. The first thing
don't go and subscribe yet. Then is what John's saying. Stick around and subscribe at the end. We will remind you at the end,
and then click subscribe. Take the information first. So, first of all, I favor, as we've talked about in the past, I favor hard copy documents. So I print everything off. So if you're like me, get yourself an A4 folder or something like that you can put this document in. Or you might have a folder on your computer where this information goes. The important thing is that the information goes in one place that you can access, and it's a working document. It's not something that's going to gather dust on a shelf, and it's not a tick box exercise. This is going to drive activity, drive action for a rolling 12 months, most likely. So what goes in there? Well, first of all, let's revisit what we talked about in the past. Your company mission, what your company does, what you want it to do, and how that matches with your personal values and your company values. So those mission and value statements should be the first page, because they're the things that are going to feed into whenever you put an advert together, whenever you write a letter. Is it in line with those values? Is it in line with that mission? Does it say what you want people to feel about your company? Are you leading them in the right way? The client avatar, again, we've talked on numerous occasions about how important it is to have a recognized ideal client avatar. That has to be in there, because as well as putting across your mission and your values, your advert has to resonate with that client, with your ideal client. Otherwise, what's the point in doing it? It's not going to work, because you're going to be qualifying people that are coming to you based on an advert that doesn't attract the right people. So you're just going to be rejecting work, rejecting clients. Then I would suggest that you have a little bit of information in there about competitors. Now, with your standard marketing plan and with your standard business plan, and we talked about business plans before, so you should have this information in there. Your marketing plan and your business plan, there is going to be some overlap. The difference with what you're looking at with your competitor information with your marketing plan is you're looking at what are they doing well, what are they doing badly. So it could be a SWOT analysis. Okay, because if you look at your competitor and say they're doing really well with one thing, well, how can you compete with that? If that's their USP How do you take that away from them? And that's an aggressive strategy for a marketing plan. But if they're going to be working aggressively to take your business, because if there's one client and there's two businesses, who gets the client? Well, you do, if you plan ahead and you plan properly. Go for it, Steve.
Could you just dive a little bit deeper, just for those people that don't know what a SWOT analysis is? Could you just give them a bit really high visibility as to what that stands for?
Yep.
And then obviously just jump back if you don't mind, because some people might not have heard of or ever come across a SWOT. And I've got a little resource that people can use, and we'll put these in the show notes afterwards that I'll drop in after you've gone through that.
Yep. A SWOT analysis is a simple diagram, basically. So it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, in your business plan, when we talked about business plans before, we talked about this from the point of view of what are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you think of it as a window with 4 panes, and each pane is one of those, and you just fill them in. What you need to do for your marketing plan is you need to be looking at that from the point of view of what is your competitors, and I would suggest maybe your main 3 competitors: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The important ones there are the strengths and the weaknesses for this purpose, because you want to work out how you can how you can work with their strengths and take away that USP. But you also want to capitalize on their weaknesses. If they're weak in an area, that's your sales pitch. You know, we're great on this. Ask around. We're the best in the marketplace for this. Right. And that's where that works in, builds in with your positioning, which is something that we may talk about in more detail in future episodes. But that's kind of a top-down view of what a SWOT analysis is. So I would look at including one of those for maybe your top 3. Okay. Then if you've got existing clients already, any client feedback, copies of that. Okay. Now that, and I'm not just talking about good feedback. I'm talking about good feedback, bad feedback. Take those, get copies of that, put it in there, because as an ongoing thing, you want to be looking at that feedback, spotting where the weak points are. You know, someone gives you a bad review somewhere, or not even a bad review, but a mediocre review. You want to be asking yourself, is this something that is just down to this person? Is this a one-off? Is this a problem with my process? Do I need to change something? And do I need to do any damage limitation? And we talked about that a few episodes ago. If you remember, we talked about if you make a mistake in public, correct it in public. Do you need to do that? So what that's telling you is giving you an overall feel of your place in the marketplace. And that should feed into the way that you do your marketing, because you might need to address some of those things in some of your ads, or you might need to put out some PR or whatever. These are all different forms of marketing, some of which we've covered, some of which we haven't yet. And then you want to move from there into details of each of the marketing efforts that you've done so far. And this is where you need to be specific. And this is where we come into the overlap between my area and Steve's area, really. So the first thing is, for each of your marketing efforts that you've done so far, what is it? Be specific. Is it an ad? If it's an ad, take a copy of it, put it in your folder. Keep details of its cost. So you might need a spreadsheet for this. Cost, number of impressions, if it's online or if it's in a newspaper, and what was the return on that investment. Keep copies of that. Details and results of any A/B testing. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. You need to have those results, because it's going to feed into the future. If you've worked out that a certain type of wording works for a certain type of advert, and in a year's time you want to repeat that advert, well, you can save yourself a number of steps if you remember what you did a year ago. So that becomes your first one to test and alter. So have that in place. Then for each campaign, I would suggest, and this is just from experience, but I would suggest, again, another spreadsheet. record of your sales 4 weeks prior to any campaign that you run. And that should be a rolling 4 weeks. Sales during your campaign. And then sales for 4 weeks after the campaign. Now, why am I suggesting you do this? You're doing this because if you can't measure the effect of your marketing campaign, there's no point doing it. You cannot succeed unless you can prove success. Really, really important. If you can't measure it, you can't succeed. If you get nothing else from this day, today, this session, take this. Okay? Any details of any other marketing ideas that you want to implement. And this is not saying you're going to implement it. This is just basically a brainstorming list. Somebody mentions to you, oh, I did this last week. Sounds good. That might work for me. I'm going to write that down. Why are you keeping this list? Because it's important to try. You can't just have one method. Because if suddenly that method dries up, your business disappears. You have to have, it's like anything else, where you need consistency. You have to have at least one or two going now, one or two ready as a backup, and then a list of things that you're researching in case you choose to do it. And the way you choose to do it is by keeping that list and then saying, that works really well. I can see on my list that was recommended by Steve. I'm going to see if I can find out from Steve how effective it was, whether I think it's going to work for me. Really important. Okay. So, and then moving on, where you're using a sales funnel. And again, Steve is the guy to speak to about this side of things. But you want to keep an eye on your sales figures. And I know Steve talks about that in quite a lot of detail prior. But you need to keep this information. Have with you a diagram which shows the sales funnel. The stats relating to the funnel, when you get them, you can compare that to the sales funnel. You can see really easily, right, this funnel is people are dropping out at this stage, and I can see it on the sheet of paper. And the reason I'm recommending this is because I've used sales funnels, and when they're on the computer or in the system, I find them quite confusing. So if people drop out at a certain stage, it's easier for me to see it on a piece of paper. If you're visual, print it out. It's easier to see. Get your stats. Make sure you get your stats relating to the funnel. Again, if you can't measure it, you can't succeed. Get those statistics. You want to be able to see at a glance what is working and what needs changing so you can change it fast. And the whole point about having a marketing plan, apart from planning in advance, is flexibility. Because the more flexibility you've got, the more successful you're going to be. Because once you start getting successful, if we go back to that little scenario from earlier on, where I said 1 client, 2 businesses, if you start taking that other business's clients, or if people start coming to you instead of them, they're going to start aggressively looking at taking those clients back. The flexibility that you'll get from having a working document marketing plan coupled with that business plan and that sales information. And I know we've kind of widened the standard traditional marketing plan is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a wider definition, which includes those sales statistics that you can use to change things quickly. Now, what you do then, when you can see what needs changing, you can see how what you're doing fits with the statistics. That 4 week stat spreadsheet shows you what's working and what percentage you're getting growth. Because the other thing to consider, as well as return on investment, is percentage return on investment. Is it growing your business by a percentage that makes the effort of running that campaign worthwhile? Is it worth doing in another month? Is it worth doing in another year? Is it worth repeating, or does this become a one-off campaign? And you shouldn't be too precious about that. If your business needs to be led by the figures. And the final piece to the puzzle which I would recommend, and I know Steve is going to jump in after this and add things that he would probably add into this as well, is the marketing calendar. Now, this lends itself to, we're going to go into this in much more detail next week, but what a marketing calendar is exactly what it says it is. It's a spreadsheet with, along the top, it's got every day of the year, and then it's got different events that happen during the year, and then you plan in your marketing campaigns, so you know exactly what's coming, when it's coming, what you need to do in advance, where your time needs to be during that campaign, and whether anybody else is involved. But we'll show you how to do that next week. But that, and I've gone through that very, very quickly, but there's an awful lot of information in there to build, and your homework for this week is going to be to go back through this episode, and you'll need to pause it on numerous occasions, because I've really barreled through this because I wanted to keep it within the time. But go through this episode again, make some notes, and then begin to build this plan. Sounds like a lot of work. It really isn't. A lot of this you've already got. You've already got your avatar. You should already have your mission and your values statements. If you've done the work on the business plan that you should have done way back, I think week 4 or 5, you should have competitor information that you can use to build that SWOT analysis. Steve is going to put a link to a resource, a template for that, as he mentioned before. You should already have a folder with your good feedback in. So all you need to do is add your bad feedback if you've got any of that, or even your neutral feedback. I can't stress this enough. Bad feedback is quite rare. It's very, very vocal, but it's quite rare. But what you will see is neutral feedback. If you're getting neutral feedback, it means that you're performing your task, but you're just not going over that extra mile. And that's important. The extra mile in this is important. Steve and I were talking about books before this, before we hit play or record. And I don't know what's happening with my words today, Steve, but and we were talking about how we're both devotees of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. If you haven't read that book, go get it. That's the second piece of your homework. It's the first piece of homework I've ever given. I think Steve has as well in this series of podcasts, which is going to cost you something, but it will give you such a return. Go buy that book and read it, but start work on this marketing plan. Steve, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah,
I mean, there's loads.
There is. I'm conscious of time,
we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
It's me.
It's you again. You've gone off.
Me,
again.
Do you know my speaker? For some reason, every so often, it just switches off.
It's that you want to do a pattern interrupt, mate, like we spoke about in previous episodes. Keep it engaged. So, well, look, you've just covered, like you said, a vast amount of usable content that you can actually, put into any type of business. What I wanted just to touch on briefly is one of the resources that you can use. John mentioned at the beginning of what he's just gone through. If you prefer physical, paper, pen, one thing or another, that's fine. It works. I sometimes lose bits of paper, or I'm just writing something down. The pen will go dead on me, and it's like, what do I do? So I have an app on my phone, but you can use it on the computer as well. And we'll put the link to this, and we're not affiliated, by the way, to this, so we're not making any money. It's just just one that I've used. There's many out there. You can either use Word and flip it so it's that way around, so it's landscape rather than portrait, and there is a template in there that will put a series of boxes, and you just fill in the bits in the box, and that's the flow for your plan. Now, it isn't going to deep dive into each section that John sent. You can do a separate one for that, so you can do almost like a family tree scenario with it, and this is the high level. And then from there, you work down. So like John was saying, mission and values to begin with. So you'd have a box saying mission and values, then a line under it, and then you'd have a box. You'd have some content in there that's relevant to your mission and values, and then deep dive further and deep dive further. And then your next one would be client avatar. Again, I went through the blueprint avatar. People have paid me literally thousands and thousands of pounds for something I have given you the information so you can go and do it yourself. It might not be in as granular detail, but it will certainly be good enough value for you to be able to utilize. So it's not going to waste your time. It's going to make a difference. Again, client avatar box at the top, deep dive, deep dive, deep dive. If you want to use something that's online and paid, and it's a small fee, again, we're not affiliate, we're not making any money out of this, then check out something called Mindomo. That's Mindomo, mindomo.com. And that's all about being able to plan everything out. And you can basically, it's like a mind map. And you can just add the boxes and add the arrows. So it's very similar to the suggestion I've given on the Word document, Microsoft Word document. You know, it's up to you. Have a look at it, and we'll make sure the link to that is in the show notes below. Some other things that John mentioned about the numbers and doing the 444. Now, this is why it is so important. And John touched on this, and you might not have picked up on it. So like he said, watch it again, but I'm just going to cover it in a little bit of a different angle, a different approach that might resonate with you a little bit more, so you get it. So when you listen to it back, it makes even more sense. And that is, if you don't know your numbers, and we've covered the numbers things now, you structure it and like measure it all before in a previous episode. But what John was saying was, by the 444, if you know what's happened, happening, gonna happen. Yeah. So what's happened? What's going to happen, what's happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen. Key what I've just said there. If you don't have the what's happened, how do you know the happening is better or worse than what's happened? And therefore, you cannot possibly forecast what's going to happen. So you don't know whether or not the efforts that John mentioned you're putting in are positive or negative to moving the needle in your business and taking it forward in a positive direction rather than going like that. And nobody wants a business to fall off the cliff. So what I've said before is I do what's called the 180 rule, where I reverse engineer everything. So for an example, very, very quickly, if you've got an offer that you're selling your business and it's say $5,000, all right, it's a low ticket, low to medium sized ticket thing. You got $5,000. If you haven't done the 444, how can you reverse engineer to know how many cold prospects you need, not want, but need to get into your sales funnel cycle in order to make it a profitable $5,000 sale at the end? Now, the way you do that is you reverse engineer. Like I said before, you need to know your numbers, and you get that from what John said. So that's why you need to listen to what he said in the 444 and knowing and working out the numbers. Go back to the previous episodes where I went through how you calculate the numbers as well, because this is so important. Because if you get this wrong, and I did an Instagram reel on this a number of weeks ago, that this is the quickest way to go bankrupt. If you do not know your numbers based on the activity and the effort you're putting into your business, how do you know that it's positive? How do you know it's the right thing to be doing? And just sticking your finger in the air saying, I'll test this, again, like what John said earlier, I'm going to try this. And then you've not measured what outcomes you got from that, the insights, the analytics. It might sound really boring if you're not into your numbers, but if you're boring and not into your numbers, you're not going to have a business for very long, because you are really rolling the dice every day you are in business. And we don't want you to do that. We want to help you succeed and have longevity and be around for a long time. So knowing the conversion of your numbers, and that could be for your ACV, which is your average customer value. It could be for your LCV, which is your lifetime customer value if they repeat purchase from you. Knowing those numbers, again, is going to help where you're putting your money for your ad spend and your time. So that's just a little bit of extra I wanted just to add onto what John was saying. So, but, you know, fantastic quality content as always there, John. So nice one, mate.
No problem. And that takes us nicely up to, would you believe it, Steve, for the first time in weeks, we've actually hit 30 minutes.
Oh, rubbish. You're having me on.
No, absolutely. Exactly 30 minutes we're on. So, I think we should probably leave it there.
No, let's go for another 10 minutes. We get a break and have a bit of a lifetime.
And yeah, if, you know, do your homework. As Steve said, any issues with it, you know where we are. Contact details are below this video, or we've given you our website address. It all, you know, come to behindthebusiness.uk if you're listening to this, not watching it on YouTube, and we'll be happy to help. But absolutely. Until next week, from Steve,
see you later.
Take care.